It is now 4:30 p.m. I would like to call the meeting of Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Our first order of business. Ken Norman is not here, so I get to play chair tonight. Now I'm going to take full advantage of it. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion carries. The next item is the consent agenda, and Ken Norman doesn't usually do this, but I'm going to do it. Consent agenda has those items on it that are deemed non-controversial and will be passed in one motion. Some of the things that might be in a consent agenda are minutes and those kinds of things, which are normally not very controversial. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made and second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. We are now to customers to be heard and recognitions. Are there any customers to be heard this evening for any item that is not on our agenda? Any customers to be heard that is not on the agenda? If not, we'll move on to recognitions, which this thing is the most favorite part of my role as the Moorhead Public Service Commission, because we truly believe in higher education, and we would like to reward quality education in our high schools, our seniors, and those that are in community colleges. So tonight we will be awarding some scholarships, and Commissioner Anderson will be handing out the certificates down in the front of the room. What I'm going to do is go through them in order that they are. We would ask the winner to come up to Dave. He will hand you a certificate. Stay there for a couple seconds so that our general manager can take a picture. Parents and others in the audience, if you want to come up there and take a picture when your winner is announced, please feel free to do so. And we will wait long enough for you all to have the photos that you need. Okay. Each year, MPS is a proud sponsor of scholarship programs, which awards college scholarships to local high school and college students. And they consist of 3 different programs: the Public Power Essay Scholarship, the Public Power Essay Employee Scholarship, and an MPS Video Scholarship. Our first winner tonight is Kelsey Schultz, is being awarded first place. Kaylee. I read through this afternoon. I apologize. Kaylee is being awarded first place in the MPS Power Essay Customer Scholarship Contest for $1,000, and the $1,000 is better than mispronouncing her name. Kaylee's essay is being awarded also third place in the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association statewide Tom Bobbitt's Memorial Scholarship Contest for an additional $1,000. Kaylee is graduating from Park Christian School here in Moorhead and plans to attend Grand Canyon University, which she tells me is in Phoenix, to study worship arts management. She is the daughter of William and Don Schultz. So, Dave, please present the award.
Hey Les, that's the first time anyone's won the MNUA scholarship from Moorhead.
Cool. I don't know if the audience out there heard it. It is the first.
Casey's correcting me, sorry.
Okay. Bill made an error, slight error, so I'm not going to repeat it. It's a good thing he was off mic.
If he anything, it would be great.
Sorry, but the brothers who got another scholarship from us actually did get it.
Did he get the first one?
Yeah.
First time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have we had one recently?
2 years ago.
Okay.
Well, first one in 2 years.
Yeah, first one in 2 years. All right. Luke Lillehaugen, is Luke here?
He couldn't make it.
He could not. I'm going to read through it anyhow because I think we should. Luke is being awarded second place in the MPS Public Power Essay Customer Scholarship Contest for $500. He is graduating from Moorhead High School and plans to attend college to study chemistry or mathematics. He is the son of Mark and Carolyn Lillehaugen. Andrea Wilmer, is Andrea here? She can come down. Andrea has been awarded first place in the MPS Public Power Essay Employee Scholarship Contest for $1,000. Andrea is graduating from Moorhead High School and plans to attend the University of North Dakota. She is the daughter of Mike and Trudy Wilmer. Mike is an MPS employee. So please award the certificate. Our next winner is Corinne Burrell. Is she here? She is being awarded first place in the MPS Video Scholarship Contest for $1,000. Is currently a student at Concordia College in Moorhead. And we're going to show her. Okay, we'll show that after the awards. Okay. Mr. Anderson's phone is ringing. I got to do everything up here tonight. Norman never has to do all this. Courtney, is Courtney here?
Yes.
Courtney Duchesne, did I get it right? Thank you. Is being awarded second place in the MPS Video Scholarship Contest for $500. Courtney is graduating from Moorhead High School and plans to attend the University of Southern California to study screenwriting. She is the daughter of Ruth and Paul Duchesne. Please award the certificate. We also, yeah, that's all for the people here, I believe, right?
Unless they want some video, but otherwise yes.
Mike is not here, the winner at Wadena, right?
No, he is not.
Okay. I want to read this too because it's important for our field. Back in 2014, we established a partnership with M-State at Wadena and to assist students pursuing education in electrical utility line worker programs. And we created a scholarship for that, and the current year's scholarship winner is Alex Ames from Hawley, Minnesota. And as part of the program, he will be employed at MPS this summer, learning line worker on the job between his first and second year. And I want to personally congratulate all of you winners here tonight. I spent most of my career in higher education, and I truly appreciate young folks going on to college. So, well done. And you're certainly welcome. Oh, we're going to show the video. We're going to show the video back room. Very good.
You're a pretty demanding chair, aren't you?
Hi, my name is Corinne, and I live in a dorm on the campus of Concordia College in Moorhead. I'm here to tell you that even if you do live in a dorm, conserving electricity is easier than you think. You can save electricity by setting your laptop to sleep mode after you're done using it and then shutting it off when you're through. You can also save electricity by using a power strip and then shutting off the power strip before you decide to leave the room. To save trees, find notebooks that have certification of using recycled material. To save more trees and paper, find the setting on your computer that allows you to print double-sided. You'll save twice the amount of paper. Did you know the average office worker uses 10,000 sheets of copy paper each year? The United States alone, which has less than 5% of the world's population, consumes 30% of the world's paper. By printing double-sided and recycling your used paper, we can help to lower that statistic. outside, open your blinds, turn off your air conditioning and heat, and open up your windows. Dorms usually offer recycling containers for each room. When you fill one, you can sort the items in your container into their respective bins. Make sure to turn off the faucet when brushing your teeth to save on water. To save on both electricity and paper, use a hand towel to dry your hands after washing them. Try shortening the duration of your shower. For every minute that you shorten your shower, you can save between 5 and 10 gallons of water. In America, enough plastic is thrown away each year to circle the earth 4 times. Billions of pounds of plastic can be found in our oceans. By using reusable water bottles, we can help to lower that. You can also save electricity by using the cold setting on your washer. By air drying your clothes, you can save electricity and energy that the dryer would have wasted. By having green plants in your dorm, you can help to improve the air quality in your room. Save on gas and energy by using a bike when moving about campus. Even if you don't have your own bike, a lot of campuses offer a bike rental program where you can rent a bike for a few hours. To choose food that didn't go through a fryer or use electricity to make. And don't forget to clean your plate. If you don't live in a dorm, there are other ways to save electricity. Exchange your halogen light bulbs with compact fluorescent light bulbs. They are more energy efficient and give off the same amount of light. Make sure to recycle those bulbs when they're done. You can also use motion detector lights for all of your outdoor lighting and consider using timers for your indoor lighting. They are convenient and efficient and waste less energy. Make sure to set your refrigerator between 30 and 42 degrees Fahrenheit and use the power save switch if you have one. Also make sure to repair your refrigerator door if you feel cold air around the closed door or if moisture is collecting.
Do we have a link to our website?
Do what?
Do we have a link to that on our website?
Not yet.
Not yet?
MCAM's had it, yeah. MCAM actually does our judging and they also play it for us.
Cool.
Okay. Again, you're all welcome to stay through our entire meeting. It's so exciting and everything else, but if you feel the need to leave, you certainly may. And again, congratulations to all our winners tonight.
Cool.
On with the rest of the business. Any old business, Mr. General Manager?
Wait.
Oh, wait a minute.
Is it okay if I accept the report?
Oh, yes.
I move we accept the report.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the report. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Thank you, Casey. And it's written right there on my agenda, isn't it? Accept report. Okay, so I'm not as good as I said.
You're still better than Ken.
Do we have any old business, Bill?
No, we don't.
Okay. Going on to reports. Councilmember Duran, do you have a report from the City Council?
No, it's been pretty, I'm not going to say it's been quiet. It's never quiet, but in terms of relevant items to MPS and utilities, nothing to report.
Thank you. Public Service Commissioners, anything to report from?
I have a quick one.
Go ahead, Ralph.
So a couple of weeks ago, Chris and one water division let me go into have an adventure.
Ooh.
So I actually went into one of our reservoirs right next to the water plant, and I expected, if you look at it from the outside, it looks like a little hill. Well, hill, you know, it's about this high, green. And I expected this dungy little thing going on, and it ends up that we actually have these huge reservoirs. How much water do they hold? 2.5 million gallons or something?
One's 2.5, one's 3.
So we have 4 of them, right?
Yeah, the other two are a lot smaller.
Yeah, a little small, okay. But anyway, so I went in there and I expected a little dungy little thing going on, and you go in there and it looks like a cathedral. I mean, 16-foot ceilings, massive pillars, looks like a Roman temple almost. And it was quite impressive to see what's actually underground and how we actually deal with the water. So thanks for Chris, and I think we open them up once every 15 years or so. So by the next time we're going to open them up, I will not be here. But it was a great experience to actually see it, because it's one of those pieces of infrastructure that you don't even know about. You see the water towers, you see some lines maybe, but that thing was just amazing. I mean, to go in there and have this cave or cabin with all the water, or well, no water in, of course, now, but it was pretty cool. So thanks for doing that.
Any other commissioner reports? John, Dave? General manager report.
Just a couple of things, and a couple of them are related to the, well, first one, I guess, is we got Prairie Roses in the paper yesterday for our water division's work on the Heritage Garden and Amphitheater. And let me just read it to you if you haven't seen it, because it is easy to miss. But it says, Prairie Roses to the private public effort underway to complete Moorhead's Heritage Garden and Amphitheater near the site of the former municipal power plant adjacent to Woodlawn Park. The location is beautiful, and when completed will be one of the city's outdoor showpieces. In addition to hosting outdoor programs in the amphitheater, the garden will be kind of a historic homage to the heritage of the power plant, which served the city for many years. Grants have helped fund the project, but a small army of volunteers has provided a lot of on-the-ground work to make it happen. After nearly 5 years of planning and building, it's taking shape nicely. Good work by all. Our water division was, and especially our water crew, was instrumental in getting this done just before the 1 inch of rain over the weekend. And so it's all the seeded. The amphitheater portion is seeded and covered and should be starting to get some grass on it. On the top, where the garden will be, we called it the Defiant Garden. That's not seeded, but there'll be work this summer that's done on that, and then I'm guessing by next spring it'll look pretty good. So that's just a little bit of an update, but we got Prairie Roses for that. So that's
All right.
and the water crew definitely deserves a lot of kudos, because the small army of volunteers, I think, were mainly MPS employees. So, but thanks to them for doing that.
What is going to be the official name of,
I think
do we
it's-
know yet?
Well, right now it's Moorhead's Heritage Garden and Amphitheater.
Okay.
So,
It was at one time called the Defiant Garden.
yep,
And sometimes we use that term, so,
yep.
okay.
Yep. And I think actually Defiant is trademarked or something, so we actually they couldn't use that.
Okay.
So anyway, so that was one thing. And then later on this evening, we will have at 7 o'clock an informational meeting about our Capture the Sun program. And our Capture the Sun program is a community solar garden. We've mentioned before that we need 66 to fully complete the project. And as of just this afternoon, Dennis said someone walked in and has subscribed to the 66th one. So we will be talking to the commission about what to do, because we'll have the informational meeting tonight. We could possibly go double that or maybe a little more, but we'll have to look at all the, all of our financial information and what other programs we're going to possibly steal from to get that thing completed. So that'll be interesting tonight. And we did get very good coverage. Commissioner Ralph was on the news last Friday, right? He was on KVLY and did a excellent job
Look handsome.
promoting that. Yeah, so that was good. Thank you for doing that, Ralph.
I looked handsome too.
You
And
did.
he- yeah. And
Better
he
than the rest of the
and he looked
commissioners
handsome,
tonight?
too. And this morning, and you know, we have to give kudos to the forum. They'd had a real nice article this morning in the paper, and it did talk about the informational meeting tonight and just provided some information on the solar programs that are being looked at in the metro area. We do have the first. It looked like Cass County had some plans to maybe do one for next year, and Excel maybe beyond that. So Dennis did a nice job on the article in the paper today. And then Dennis was pictured in the Moorhead newspaper, the FM Extra, or they call it the FM Extra yet?
No, just the extra.
Just the extra, okay. And so that was good, so thanks for the extra to give us some publicity there as well. So a lot of good coverage on that program, and again, we've got a informational meeting at 7 o'clock tonight right here, first floor, City Hall, in case anybody at home is interested in coming and learning more about the Capture the Sun program.
And otherwise, they should contact MPS office?
They can contact MPS office. They'll be routed to Dennis Eisenbrown. They can call him directly as well. It's right on the information that they got in the mail. Or they can go to the website and get some further information on the program.
Very good.
And we're continuing to take interest, right? We're not, come on,
Oh, okay.
come on. It's not my first rodeo, you know?
Yeah.
We're going to continue to take interest, right? Even though we have 66 for the first phase, we're still going
Exactly.
to. Okay.
Yep. Because we expect that we could, you know, if we get near the next 66, we would do 2 of them. And beyond that, we may have to put people on the waiting list for next year. And I think we'll do this all over again next year, so. But we've had a good response. I mean, very good response to the program. So, thank you.
How's the wind turbine?
The wind turbine is up and working. It was actually I think Travis told me, like a short-term or intermediate high temperature alarm that was happening. And they're wondering if it might be the transducer from that, or it could be the wiring between there. So they're looking at probably replacing some of that so we don't get these intermittent outages with the west turbine. So, but it is operating now, so that's good.
Cool.
Anything else, General Manager report?
No, thank you.
We're on to item number 9. Are you leading us on this one, or is Nancy, or?
Nancy's pretty close there. So Nancy,
I noticed she moved the podium into place
Yeah, she did.
and sat a little closer to it, and that's why I assumed that perhaps she was going to start off item 9. Nancy?
Nancy Lund, Administration and Finance Manager. And tonight I would just like to introduce Derek Flanagan, CPA from Eide Bailey. So Eide Bailey has been engaged by the City Council and the Commission to do the annual audit. And it is their responsibility to report back to the governing board what they found during that audit process. What Derek will be telling you is that we received a clean audit opinion, no deficiencies in internal control, no significant audit findings is what we're striving for each year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Derek and let him walk through, I think, the executive summary on that audit, and then it's available for any questions. Derek.
Thank you. Well, as she said, I am Derek Flanagan from Eide Bailey, here to report on the 2014 year-end financial statements. We audit the financial statements, and our job is to express an opinion on those financial statements, and then also to just report on the happenings for the year. So as we do that, what I'm going to do is walk through the document that's called the executive summary, and I believe that's page 27 of your packet that was given out. And I'll walk through that page by page, but if you have any questions or comments or concerns, feel free to interrupt or just to ask them as we're going through that page. I'd rather discuss it while we're on that page than wait till the end or anything like that for any questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to go through it page by page. Page 1 there at the top, the purpose of this executive summary. This document is not required by any kind of accounting standards or auditing standards. This is actually something we created to try to help you with the analysis of the financial statements. The financial statements have to be in a certain format, and they only include 1 year of information. And so what this executive summary does is we're able to include ratios and graphs, and we have historical information, sometimes upwards of 5 years of information, so you can see trends. And so we created this document just to help you with that analysis, to have that ability to provide that information. With that being said, we can always modify this document. If there's stuff you'd like to see taken out, we can do that. If there's stuff you'd like to see added or covered in more detail, just let us know. You know, have Mark give us a call. We can certainly do that. Middle of the page there, the audit opinion. You received an unmodified opinion in the current year. That is the opinion you want, and that is the opinion you've traditionally received, so another clean audit. One thing this year is that you did spend more than $500,000 in federal funds, which triggered a separate audit, an audit of your federal funds. You received an unmodified opinion on compliance for your federal audit, which is what you would want for that audit as well. So 2 clean opinions there, 2 separate audits, but both I'm here to report that both were clean opinions. Along with that, as part of our audit, we're required to report any findings that we may come across during the audit, both on the federal audit and on the audit of the financial statements. I am pleased to tell you that we do not have any findings related to either of those audits. Moving along to page 2. Page 2 is a pretty simple graph here. It's just your unrestricted cash, and it's as of a point in time, as of December 31st each year, and we have 5 years of information there, just to show you where you've been and where you're at currently. There was a decrease in the current year in your cash, and that cash position as of December 31st, 2014, $3,999,688. Page 3. Our first ratio on page 3, your days cash on hand. You can see the formula at the top of the page there is your cash and investments divided by operating expenses minus depreciation and transfers out divided by 365 days in the year. What this tells you, what this ratio is meant to tell you is just how much cash you have in terms of days that available to pay off your operating expenses for that fiscal year. In 2014, for the electric, the number of days was 148. For water, 197. Again, that decrease in cash that we noted in the previous page had an effect on this ratio. As you can see, the water decreased from the prior year of 363 to 197. And we'll get into some of the reasons for that on a future page. Page 4. Your statement of net position for the electric fund. This is another graph that's as of a point in time. So this is your position as of December 31st for each year. The graph shows you your total assets, your total liabilities, and the difference therein is the total net position. Your total assets increased 3.8%, $2.4 million in the electric fund, and your liabilities decreased $931,000 or 3.9%. Overall, that leads to an increase in your net position for 2014. On page 5, we have the same graph, this time for the water fund. The water fund total assets increased 1.7% or $783,000. And the liabilities decreased $99,000 or 1.5%. So again, the combination of those two led to an increase in your net position for the water fund. And as we go along in this document, we'll get into what caused some of those differences from prior year to the current year as we talk about your operations for the year. Page 6, liquidity ratio. This ratio is listed at the top of the page there, but in short, what it's telling you is it's telling you your ability to pay your bills as they come due. If you think of it in this manner, a ratio of 1 would indicate that you have $1 in available cash for every $1 in bills that are currently due. That ratio, and this takes in both funds of public service, that ratio for 2014 is 0.8. And so you can see that benchmark generally is 1, just because then you have $1 of available cash for every $1 in bills that are due. And we've listed some of that research that we found and benchmarks there at the bottom of the page.
Just a quick clarification.
Sure.
As far as when we look at the ratios here, as far as in your opinion, how significant is that this difference between the 1-to-1 versus our 0.8?
I would hate to just focus in on just one of these ratios. You have to kind of consider all the different factors. This ratio may have went down with planned spending. Maybe you had some significant capital assets that you had to purchase in the current year, or maybe some repairs came up in the current year that had to be taken care of. So I'd hate to take any of these one ratios in a vacuum and just analyze that one ratio. What I would tell you is none of these ratios have any huge red flags to them. Last year you were at 0.99, you were almost right at that benchmark, but you weren't there yet, and you weren't above it or anything like that. What we'd like to do is, when we see some of these ratios, is we want to make sure that you're aware of what's causing that there's no surprises there, that you know what factors cause those ratios to decline.
Now, this is for both water and electric combined.
Yep, this liquidity ratio is everything together.
And if you separated them, it might be it would show a little bit more of the story.
Yep, because as we've talked about on some of the previous pages, and we'll talk about in some of the future pages, we'll get into what caused some of those decreases. Page 7. Pretty simple ratio here, long-term debt divided by total assets. This is called the long-term debt ratio, but you can see the trend there for the 5 years, continuously going down. And again, we did our research to provide you with a benchmark as best we could here, and the research we found is that some financial analysts suggest that this ratio should not exceed a benchmark of 0.5. You are well below that benchmark of 0.5, and the other thing is it's continuously declining. You've continuously been paying down your debt at a higher ratio than taking on assets. That ratio for 2014, 0.18.
We're just saying it's got to be the budget committee.
There you go. There you go.
For those of you who don't know, the budget
Yeah.
committee are the two people besides me.
Oh.
Oh. And he looks good on TV too, he says.
No, I didn't say good, I said handsome.
Okay.
Page 8. Page 8 is the debt service coverage ratio. So again, the last two pages we're analyzing your ability to pay your debt service. This one's just a different ratio here. And again, a ratio of 1 for this one is ideal, which means that there are adequate revenues to cover your debt payments. And again, this one is both funds within Moorhead Public Service. So this is a combined ratio. That ratio for 2014 is 1.64, down from 2.23 in the prior year, but above that ratio or that benchmark that we found of 1. And again, that decrease, we'll get into what caused that decrease in the future pages as we start to talk about the operations for the year. So as I kept mentioning, we'll get into the operations for the year for both funds. That's what the rest of this executive summary is about. So everything from here on out will encompass a full year's worth of activity for all the years that are presented, whereas a lot of the other stuff was as of a point in time on December 31st. The future pages will encompass a full year worth of activity. Page 9, the first one there, the operations of the electric fund. Now we're back to breaking out the different funds and analyzing them separately. This graph here just has a line graph of 5 years of information and provides you with your operating revenues, operating expenses, and the difference there will be your operating income, and at the bottom, your transfers out. Page 10, we'll analyze the electric fund some more now on the expenditures. 3 years of information there in pie chart format. And if you're more of a numbers person and like to see just how much that dollar amount is for each year, at the bottom of the page, we have listed out the dollar amount spent on each category.
Why did transmission go up so much?
That was the Opportunity Substation transmission line.
Yep. Okay.
And I'm not sure when it was booked, but maybe that's the time.
Must have been in 14 then, right?
Oh, okay. Okay, so we separated out some of the transmission for the Southwest Power Pool, you know, to identify it so that we can get reimbursed. So
purchase power and distribution used to be, so the number is still, when you add them up,
Right.
it's still at about 3/4, right?
right.
With the 2014 numbers, what we did was start reallocating transmission costs that were included in the MRES bill. We reallocated those down to transmission costs so that we'll be able to recover some of those through the WAPA going into the SPP pool and everything. So if you look at the total of the purchase power and the distribution, you'll see that 7% change is just moved from purchase power up into transmission, which will help us recover those costs going into this new power pool.
Essentially, comparing the purchase power and the distribution and transmission lines for 14 and 13 isn't apples to apples with that reclassification.
But between the two, we're still at about 84%.
Right.
So if you add them up, you still come up to that. Okay, thanks.
Yep. The last page analyzing the electric fund there is page 11 and analyzes the margins for the current year. At the top there, we list the operating margin, which is simple enough, your operating income divided by your operating revenues, and then the net margin, so we take into account all the non-operating activity as well and come up with percentages. For 2014, your operating margin was 29.2%, and your net margin 8.8% in the electric fund. The final 3 pages will analyze the water fund in the same format that we just analyzed the electric fund. Page 12 there has your operating revenues, operating expenses, operating income, and your transfers out in line graph format for 5 years. You can see there was a 14.6% increase in operating expenses, and we'll analyze that again on the next page in more detail. Page 13 then has the pie chart format, 3 years of information, percentage to the total, and has the amounts there at the bottom of the page.
So here in the distribution, we're seeing the increased expense on the water pipe replacements, whatever it is, right? No?
Increased water main breaks in 2014.
Yeah.
On the breaks. Okay.
cold winter of 14 caused some additional repairs and maintenance above and beyond previous years. And the final page of the executive summary, I know everyone's sad, it's the last page. It's the margins for the water fund. Again, the operating and net margins there. Operating margin for 2014, 16.4%. And after you take into account all the non-operating activity, that margin is 12.9% for the water fund. And that is the last page of the executive summary. Were there any additional questions, comments?
Do we have questions? John is our financial wizard, so I always look to him.
You're going to have further explanation? You had referenced that you had said you'll give us further explanations of some of the rationale for this. Is that still to come? Or is your report complete at this point?
Our report is complete. Further explanation on?
Well, in your presentation, you had said you were going to give some explanations of why we had seen some of the changes.
Yep. Yep, and so to kind of summarize that, on page 13 there, the increased expenditures in the water fund. One of the biggest reasons was just, as we mentioned, some of the water main breaks. The colder winter in 14 just led to increased repairs and maintenance above and beyond some of the previous years. And so that was one of the main reasons for the increased expenditures and I guess the decrease in your margin in the current year. And also one of the reasons for the decrease in cash in the current year was just the additional capital assets that you purchased this year. You had more than you've had in the past of capital asset purchases, and so that also is where some of that decrease in cash came.
Any additional questions or comments from the commission? Bill?
Well, the only thing I was going to mention is special thanks to Nancy Lund and to Mark Moylan for the work that they do to get this information prepared. And congratulations, it's a clean report, good report, so they've done a nice job.
You stole my thunder. That was my last note here.
Okay.
No,
Well, you said you were done.
It was just, well, I was asking for questions. I wanted to leave on a good note. I just wanted to thank them as well. The audit can be quite cumbersome. We request a lot of information, and it's stuff they have to do above and beyond their normal daily duties. And so I just wanted to thank them for their work. When we get on site, everything is organized. We get things timely. And so I wanted to thank them for all their hard work getting us that information. And that all shows with the clean audit opinion as well as no internal control findings.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Derek.
I would entertain a motion to approve or accept item number 9.
I move to approve item number 9.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve number 9. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. On to number 10. Bill?
Item number 10 is license agreements with Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway for wireline crossings. If there's questions, Travis is at the podium.
I had a couple of questions when I was looking through that. The one to the south of Moorhead, I understood the one north. Can you just give me a couple sentences on why we need that?
Sure. Travis Schmidt, Electrical Engineering Manager. Basically what the railroad crossing on basically 20th Street on the south side of town is for is with the widening or with the extension of 20th Street down to 40th Avenue, we have to actually relocate our feeder underneath the railroad tracks and south to 40th Avenue because it's going to be in the street area.
That's sort of what I thought it was, but I'd like the folks out in the audience to know that that because of the widening or the extension of 20th Street that the city is doing, and I live in the south side, I love it, especially when the interchange with 75 and 984 is being done. So it is related, and we're working with the city to get it accomplished.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 10.
I move to approve item 10.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded to approve item 10. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. That
Say, when is
motion,
that exchange going to be built?
that motion carries. Councilmember Durand, do you know an approximate date of when the,
It's this
I'm
year.
talking slowly to give her a chance here.
It's this year. Yep,
No,
they're going
it's
they're
not
going to be
this
building
year.
it this year.
They're going to start building this year?
Yep.
15 started.
Yep.
Is it?
Yep,
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I want to say this fall.
yeah.
Okay, cool. That's going to be cool.
well, we think it's not spring, right?
Yeah, it's not the spring.
Right. So it's later this year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I apologize for interrupting you earlier.
No, you don't. Item 11 on our agenda is to approve an easement for Verizon Wireless. Bill, are you doing this? Travis is doing this?
Travis, he's standing right there, so
Go
that's
for
that's
it.
good.
Verizon and their consultants have contacted MPS, and they're looking to get an easement across our property, which is down on the DOE site, or the substation south of town. Basically, they're looking to get communication or fiber optics in from 14th Street, and they also need to get electricity around the outside of the substation so that they can have power to that WAPA monopole site. So we're just asking you to approve this easement. There's going to be a one-time payment of $3,000, then hopefully an annual payment of $1,000 that we'll see for the term of the easement. This is still being approved or finalized by Verizon, but we wanted you guys' approval. It's all contingent upon John approving it as well.
Are there any questions? If this will generate money for us, John?
The term of the lease?
I think it goes forever until they decide they don't need it anymore.
So our approval tonight, if we have a motion, will be contingent on our legal counsel's okay with the language. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept them.
John has made the motion to approve item 11 contingent on legal approval. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Item number 12, Bill and I talked this morning, isn't it wonderful? We put summer volunteer water restrictions on just after a weekend of a couple inches of rain or whatever we got. So, Bill?
Yeah,
This is
item
pretty routine. We
yeah.
do it every year about this time.
Yep, routine item. We've been doing this since 1990. We've got voluntary lawn watering restrictions. We go by the even odd method. So if you got an even number home, then you can water on even number days. Odd, the same thing. And I try and encourage people to water an inch a week. Is what's generally recommended. And doing it on those days helps us with our peak demand and helps our distribution system out there. And those reservoirs you were talking about, make sure they're sized properly and that type of thing. We also in 2013 implemented water conservation rates that basically starting at 150% of your winter average, the rate is higher in the summer months. So for so if you're using your winter average and up to 50% more than that, there's no change in the rates. But once you get beyond that, then the rate does go up. Those types of rates and demand reduction activities are required by the state, and those are in effect from May through October. So if we do have a dry summer, which we may or may not have, it appeared that we were going to have a dry summer, so I was going to really tell people to really watch it when you're watering, because your bill, could be a bit of a surprise. So I do encourage people to just put an inch of water a week on their lawn. We got an inch on Monday, so don't worry about this week. At the same time, Chris Knutson, our water division manager, encourages people to actually water their lawns, helps him with his budget. Let's see, and then we just, if there's any questions on the rate itself, we've got the numbers here, but I won't give you that kind of detail.
I know we frequently get questions in the springtime about the 150% of the winter water usage from people who leave our community for the winter and go to some southern spots. And they always come back and say, well, we didn't use any water in the summer, so how come my rate goes up lower than my neighbors? And what is the answer that we give for that?
I'm pointing to Nancy if she can come
Nancy
up.
wants
She
to
probably
answer
know-
that or not. We
she
can
knows the
make Bill
better than
answer
I
it,
do.
Nancy. That's okay.
Yeah.
And I know it's a question that comes into the office because I've been asked the same question, and we might as well be right up front and give them the true answer. Nancy?
The true answer is I have to go back and check my numbers. But I believe what our system does is I think it eliminates the zero consumption months in calculating that average, but I do need to go back and check.
Which does make sense from a mathematician's point of view, that zero does not belong in an average.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I do need to check. So I know we have, there are concerns both on the wastewater side and on the water side because we both use that 150% of the winter average. And so it impacts the customer different ways on each of those different services. But I can report back to the commission on that to verify that that's what our calculation does right now.
Do we want to report back on that, or are we okay with the? We're comfortable with it.
You're comfortable?
Thank you.
Okay.
Just to, Bill, as far as the communication that's going to go out to the users, as far as regarding this program, are we going to do a marketing or any additional information? Have we done that in the past?
In the past, I know we've sent out a bill insert, but I don't believe we've, press release, okay.
And we're not the only community in the area that does this. I think all of our communities.
I think they all do it now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions on item number 12? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's made and seconded to approve item number 12. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. We're on to number 13. And this is, well, I'll let Bill lead it in. Then as an HR committee member, if I have any comments, I'll throw them in afterwards.
Yep. So since the last meeting, I believe, is when the HR committee met. The HR committee and the general manager and the admin and finance manager, along with our consultant, have been working on the classification and compensation study. And we had one good meeting where the consultant has presented that information to the HR committee. And the HR committee has asked a number of questions, and the HR committee is going to continue to work on that classification and compensation study. During that committee meeting, the HR committee said, we really should approve the general increase that was received by the other groups within Moorhead Public Service and not have the management and technical employees, wait any longer for the general increase. So this is just the general increase. What we did with the two unions of IBEW and AFSCME was a 3% increase for 2015. This would also be retroactive to January 1st. And then the classification and compensation study will probably not come to the full commission until the end of June, because end of May there was a conflict with the consultant's schedule, so it'll be about a month and a half before we bring that to the full commission. And then the management and tech employee handbook, which also generally we look at that on an annual basis and we approve that around the same time that we do wages. That is still under review from the HR committee. Nothing significant there, though. So, questions?
Any questions? John?
Just a clarification, this would be more of a inflation type of raise versus performance
Right.
for the employees.
Right.
Inflation,
Yep.
yeah. It is the similar percentage amount that our two bargaining units negotiated. And there will be, coming before the HR committee on Monday of next week, discussion on other benefits other than wages for this particular group. And that we might expect at our next meeting.
Yeah, that could be, yeah, because that doesn't.
Relatively soon anyhow,
Yep.
probably before the consultant report.
Yep.
And then the third part of this is the consultant report and what we want to do with that. Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve item number 13.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded to approve item 13. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion carries. We occasionally on this commission go into a closed session to do things that are allowed by state law. Do we have any need for a closed session tonight?
No closed session.
Okay. I'm going to go through upcoming meetings, and then I'm going to pop back to number 15. Our next public service meeting will be Wednesday. Memorial Day is Monday. City Council meets Tuesday, who normally meet Monday, so we always meet on Tuesday following Memorial Day. We do the same thing on Labor Day, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, I want to let the rest of you know I won't be able to attend that meeting that week in case
And why is
in case
that?
it creates a quorum issue or anything. But we have a graduation happening in the family that
I
week.
knew that.
So I'll be on the road to be with my daughter. So, yeah.
And with our scholarship winners, it's great that you're there for graduation. Tentatively scheduled June 16th, if necessary, and late June will be the consultant thing. Other MPS related at 7 p.m. tonight. We want everybody down here for our solar presentation. APPA, our national organization, is meeting in Minneapolis, I believe, in June. And AWWA is meeting in California also in June. At this point, is there any other business to come before the committee? Yes, Bill.
Just the American Public Power Association meeting in Minneapolis, which doesn't happen often at all. It's a very good opportunity to go there and save a little bit of money because the travel won't be as expensive. So, I mean, it's a short drive down to the Twin Cities, and it should be a good meeting, so.
Do we have any commissioners going that we know
I
of
don't
yet?
think at this point we do, but it's a,
I've been twice, and it's worth
good
attending,
meeting.
especially for people that haven't been there.
yep.
Any other items before we go down there? All right, I'm going to declare a 5-minute recess, and we will reconvene in the area down here, and we will be doing review of strategic plans and discussing water supply issues. So we have a 5-minute recess. I would like to call the meeting back to order. Our recess of 5 minutes is done. What we're doing tonight is something we started at our last meeting and I have lost my commission, haven't I? And you've lost your staff. What we started at our last meeting is a more informal discussion of certain strategic items for Moorhead Public Service and are looking to the future. And tonight we are continuing with the Water Division, and the emphasis tonight will be on water supply strategies. And we're waiting for Ralph to get down here to join us as well. He's getting water. And we're going to have Bill do the intro, and it's going to be more of a a free-form kind of discussion as opposed to an organized thing. And go for it, Bill.
And I've got, at the last meeting, I kind of introduced the top 4 or 5 items that we're going to be going through this series of strategic discussions. And the number one was water supply. We did have a presentation on that earlier. Then we went into water system reliability strategies, including infrastructure, so basically water infrastructure. Number 3 is our power system reliability strategies and infrastructure. So that'll be coming up, because we really went through 1 and then 2, and then now we're back to 1, which is perfectly fine. I kind of like the format of being able to kind of move around on these things. So we'll pick up the electric system reliability issues, next. And then we've got discussed implementation of new technologies was number 4. I think the last time I talked to you guys, I didn't quite remember which one was number 4. But we do have some interesting things to talk about there, because we'll talk about overhead to underground electric systems, where we need to maybe spend some money on those types of things, and then talk about, automated meter reading and SCADA systems, that type of thing. That kind of rounds out the top 4. I won't read the rest of them. So tonight we're here to talk about water supply again, and Chris Knutson, our water division manager, will go over some of the more recent meetings that we've had, some new news coming from the west, from the North Dakota side, and then we really are looking for some direction from the commission as to how we, move forward, given some new information, and then how to communicate that to the various other stakeholder entities that we need to communicate with. So, Chris, if you'd take over from there.
Yeah, just looking back and just providing a little bit of background as to kind of where we've come from to get to this point. We started with a 3-part series, I believe, back in the fall, and mostly in December and January, where we talked about basically water supply options for Moorhead Public Service going into the future. So first part of the series was looking at the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. Second part of the series, we had a really good model update for the Buffalo Aquifer in terms of how much capacity that Buffalo Aquifer could provide for Moorhead Public Service in a drought. And then lastly, in the series, we looked at some budgetary options for both the Buffalo Aquifer expansion and the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. And at that last kind of part 3 meeting, we provided quite a bit of input in terms of the budgetary components of the projects, but there were still some unanswered questions, I think, from the commission that we felt that needed to be addressed. So that's kind of why I think we're here again to discuss the water supply issue. So that's a little bit of the background in terms of how we got here. Some of the news that Bill was alluding to in terms of the Red River Valley Water Supply Project comes from the North Dakota State legislative session for this past session. And I think the biggest news from my perspective was that going into the next biennium, the Red River Valley Water Supply Project and Lake Agassiz Water Authority were really hoping for, I would say, a very significant contribution from the legislature in terms of funding the project. So they were looking for about $150 million for completion of the engineering associated with the Red River Valley Water Supply Project and beginning of the construction of that particular project. Based on the legislative session and some of the preliminary news we have from that, it looks like the project is going to be funded to the tune of about $5 million, plus about $7 million of additional funding that wasn't spent in the previous biennium, giving a grand total for this next biennium of about $12 million in terms of funding for the project. So a pretty significant reduction in terms of the amount of funding provided to the project. And at a recent Lake Agassiz Water Supply, Lake Agassiz Water Authority meeting, it was brought to our attention that there would likely be voluntary assessments assessed to members for the project, similar to what were assessed in, I believe it was 2013. And that assessment at that time was about $50,000. We're expecting a very similar assessment for the project for this funding in the additional biennium. So I think from staff's perspective, we'd like some input as to if it's worthwhile to continue to pay those assessments. So that's one component of the meeting tonight. I think that staff would like some direction in terms of what we'd like to do with those future assessments. Secondly, in part 3 of the water supply series, we provided a timeline in terms of what it would take for doing the Buffalo Aquifer expansion project. And I think we have a really good plan in terms of a timeline, some budgetary components, and kind of what we think the project would take. From staff's perspective, I think we'd like some input as to if we choose one path or another, when we would initiate the process for planning the project, starting the initial phases of that project if we were going to go with the Buffalo Aquifer expansion. And then just some long-term budgeting, so placing large capital amounts into our 10-year capital improvement plan and doing the appropriate budgetary forecasting for those planned expenditures. So I think those are really the two things that staff would like input on at this particular meeting. But certainly open to discussion as to any other points that were missed in the series or any other critical points that the commission feels need to be addressed.
Before we get to that, Bill, would you do me a favor and go through the folks other than the commission sitting at our little round table today so people out there know? Oh, you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yes. And we got Nancy Lund, our administrative and finance manager. Travis Schmidt is with us. He's our electrical engineering manager. We've got Sam, what's your last name again? Sam Jenkins, that's right. GIS coordinator. Casey Siraki is administrative assistant up here. We have Heidi Durand, our council liaison. Chuck Hendrickson is in the audience as well as another one of our co-council liaisons. Oh, we've got Bryant is here, Bryant Tower, yep. Project engineer. Mark Moylanen, our controller. And Dennis Eisenbrown is our energy services manager. So we've got a kind of a room full of people here.
And you won't see them all, and that's why I asked Bill to do that. And the other reason I asked Bill to identify the other group at the table is because our MPS staff does work very, very closely with one another. Water has a tough time getting pumped without electrical power and so forth. So I wanted to make sure that our audience out there understands that this is an MPS discussion, not only a water discussion. Are there comments or statements or directions? And I look to Ralph for this because he's the one of our commission that is most involved with water.
So we had the Lake Agza meeting last week, and it was interesting in that there are so many unknowns at this point with this project. I mean, funding is one item. We heard from the engineers. They haven't found a spot in the Missouri yet where they can pump enough water out. There's the wrinkle with the fertilizer plant in Jamestown, right? In Jamestown. So now they're talking potentially 2 pipelines, which in my personal opinion is absolutely insane. But that's my personal opinion. I would never say that in public. But anyway, so there's a lot of unknowns there, and I think some of the members of the board were a little bit unhappy. At least one member was a little bit unhappy, and it wasn't me, about the way that things were progressing or not progressing at all. So the good news on our end is we do have water, right? I mean, we have the aquifer. We have managed it very well over the last 20 years, knock on wood, and so we're not in the same situation that others, I mean, Fargo, for example, would be. If the rain does not come at all. So I think the big decision we have to make is at some point, and whether it's here now or whether it's in the near future, and whether it's related to the $50,000 additional assessment or not. And by the way, I don't see that coming in because I think the city of Fargo will have a little discussion on an additional assessment with all these unknowns. But at some point, we will have to make a decision whether or not we will get our water, whether or not we believe that we are secure in our water supply in the event of a long-term drought with the aquifer, or whether we do believe that we need to go and attach ourselves to the pipeline if it ever gets built. Now, I believe it will get built at some point because Fargo does need the water and upstream communities as well. But the question for us is going to be, are we secure enough in our belief that there's enough water in the aquifer that will allow us to actually have enough water for a 5 or 6 year drought if it ever came to us, and then make a decision whether or not we're going to expand our well fields in the aquifer as opposed to attaching ourselves to the pipe. I do not believe we can do both. From a pure financial standpoint, I do not believe we can do both. It's an either or. I mean, even though the expansion of the well field is going to be very expensive, and Chris will talk about that, so I don't think we can handle both. But it's one of those very, very fundamental decisions that we may never see the result of. I apologize for the bad English, but in 20 or 30 years, somebody will say, well, why didn't they? Or why did they? And that's one of those things where we just have to make a decision. And I think it will come sooner rather than later. It may be driven by additional money that we're going to be requested to be paid, or it may be driven by the fact that no matter what, we need to expand our well field in the Buffalo, right? Maybe that's a project we have to do anyway. So the meeting, again, was quite interesting. I think the next meeting in September, I think it's planned for September. I think at that point we will have more of a discussion. So far the meetings have been less of a discussion. They have been more, here's a motion, here we approve it. I think the next meeting we'll have more of a discussion because the assessment issue is going to come up, and the question will come up, what actually is going to get done. Again, we don't even know at this point whether there is an ability for enough water to be poured out in Missouri the way that is being proposed right now. If it can't be done the way it's being proposed right now, then we need to go to the federal route, which is a totally different ballgame altogether. And so I think there's going to be a cost aspect, which is going to go really sky high very quickly, even in building it. Forget about the maintenance, number one. There's the second pipeline idea that has to be figured out, and for some reason, there's a political issue going on in North Dakota whether or not to build it and how to build it. In the meantime, we have to make a decision at some point to say one or the other. I do not believe we can do both. So.
Go ahead. I guess, maybe even for the folks that might be watching this at home, it might be a good idea to just summarize the economics of the Buffalo expansion as opposed to the Red River project, because there's a lot of economic sense in there as well that I think drives our discussion, but it might be helpful to share that.
Certainly. So we developed some cost estimates internally in terms of a 40-year life cycle cost that was presented in part 3 of the series. And for the Buffalo Aquifer expansion, we're looking at a cost from a 40-year maintenance, capital expense, everything included, $25 to $27 million. And that's in comparison to, for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, we had a 40-year estimate of $38 million for a best case scenario cost and about $98 million for a worst case scenario cost. And the reason for the spread, in those two numbers is, as Ralph mentioned, there's a high degree of uncertainty in terms of several components of the project that engineers, we look at uncertainty as that's going to be something that's going to have some additional expense associated with it. So there, I would, if you said, yeah, that's a really large range, I'd say absolutely it's a large range, but we still don't know a lot of things about how that pipeline is going to get built, and some of the uncertainties as to if we get the water.
And it seems that we have at least a more comfortable margin or level of certainty that we can proceed with the expansion as opposed to waiting for the politics of so many of the politics of the situation in North Dakota to work themselves out. I've been watching that one actually quite closely as well this year, and it's becoming more complex as opposed to less complex. Yeah. The other part of the reasoning for me is, I guess I would ask you your professional opinion. Do you really believe we would ever access Red River water in a scenario that is predictable? as we talk about the long-term drought and the resources that we have available to us as opposed to what they have in Fargo, do we have any even reasonable expectation that that expensive option would be accessed, as opposed to how we can really truly develop our own resources here to serve growth and to serve the things that we have, actually already on our plate? So if you just discuss, is that even a scenario that we want to get into?
You asked about the Red River. Did you mean the Missouri?
Excuse me, the Missouri River water as opposed to,
Okay. I mean, it's really speculative in terms of if we'll ever see that pipeline built. I mean, you could argue a number of reasons for or against it being built, and you'd be right.
Yeah.
In my opinion, which one is more controllable and more favorable in terms of being built? I think the Buffalo Aquifer expansion is the most favorable project if you're comparing them side by side in terms of likelihood of being built, ease of financing, and control of costs.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I look at, and Bill would have a very similar opinion as to if we're going to evaluate the project side by side, how do we come to a recommendation? That's how we would evaluate it, and I think our recommendation would be that we develop that Buffalo Aquifer resource based on the analysis that we've done to this point.
John? Just a clarification here on the worst-case scenario for the Red River project. Does that include the cost that we would have to improve or replace the pipes already at the aquifer that we bring our water to us? And if we did use that water, does that projection also include any additional work that we'd have to do on our treatment plant for the phosphates and any of those issues? Or are we looking at then additional dollars to do those projects as well beyond the projections you give us here?
So both estimates that I did for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project include rehabilitation of the Highway 10 well line, because we included that as a critical component of the project. We just said, in terms of we're gonna have to do that infrastructure replacement anyway, so we included that in the cost. Now, the second component that you asked about, the treatment plant component, we put a number of $20 to $40 million on that. Then that's just a really top of my head type of number. I didn't do a ton of analysis on it. That was not included in those numbers. So there could be further additional expense associated with either of those numbers as well. But we wanted to keep the scope limited to just the pipeline and the rehabilitation of the Highway 10 line.
Heidi had a question or comment up there.
Yes, thank you. How has there been any? You said there's a lot of uncertainties with the Red River Valley water project. The Missouri, coming from the Missouri, how long is it expected that Fargo could draw water from the Missouri? And the reason I ask is I've seen maps and I've seen projections, and this issue I pay very close attention to. So I've read a whole slew of information. And part of that Missouri River chain is projected to be a high conflict water area. They probably project 25 years, 20 years from now. So has there been any talk about how much water for how long do they expect to pull from there? The cost for this project, have they incorporated the attorney fees, legal fees, expectations that there'll be court battles? Because I can't imagine people out west are just going to say, yeah, sure, take all the water you want from here.
Yeah, or south, for that matter. And you have Western water law. The issue was addressed a little bit in the meeting, and it's a little bit being skirted right now because it would be a big draw. And the other thing that I've personal opinion is, who says the Missouri is going to run the same way?
Right.
If we're in a long-term drought here, it probably doesn't stop in Valley City,
right?
And so That's another one, but we talked about the southern issue, that people in the south will say, wait a second, this is our water. We're talking about the Western water law here. The whole intake structure itself, where we don't know, how they're going to pull it in the first place.
Is this group that meets, how, and I haven't been paying attention to your group much, how well known or how publicized is this information? I mean, are people out west in the loop on this potential project? Do your average homeowners, farm owners know that this is looming, that this is being talked about? Or is it, one of those Imperial Fargo, let's take what we want and do what we want? How well known is this across the state?
It's been very openly discussed in the legislature this year.
Okay.
So, a good many hearings and public meetings.
Okay.
And that's part of the rub, is because now there are really two serious competing pipeline projects. And there doesn't seem to be any way that anyone's seeing the ability to combine them into one maybe oversized project that would bring water not only to Jamestown for the fertilizer plant project, but then to have the capacity to then come over the divide to provide water for this part of the state too. But it gets complicated then, because then we start getting into international law as well as Western water law. And, hence, instead of $125 million worth of funding that was really anticipated at the beginning of the session, now it's down to a tenth of that. And that really only kind of keeps pace with some of the engineering costs and keeping the project alive as opposed to getting to construction.
You bring up a great point, Dave. You got to bring international law into it, because that water that gets piped here, it's not, I don't imagine it's going to get piped back to the Missouri after it's been treated. It's going to go into our red, right, which then will end up in Winnipeg.
And the Minnesota DNR doesn't seem to like interbasin transfers on top of it, so...
That was my other question, is what does the DNR think?
There's a lot of questions here, a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I mean, they will have to address, Fargo will have to address the water supply issue somehow, but I don't know how that's going to work. And it sounded from the meeting on the second pipeline that was I'm going to paraphrase here, done deal, that was going to be built, and that's going to be only for the plant.
Yeah.
Again, you talk about water. I think what they're talking about, 80 million gallons a day to pull out of the Missouri. I think it was somewhere around there, wasn't it? 60 million gallons. That's a huge amount of water.
And you take that water, I'm sorry if I get on a little pedestal here, you take that water out of its natural ecosystem, out of its natural watershed, and you pipe it to a different ecosystem, a different watershed.
The water has to be treated, though. That's part of the
right.
Part
No,
of the
that's not my
process,
point. But the water isn't being recharged
Right.
back to its natural watershed. And how long before taking 80 million gallons a day dries up that river? I can't see how. That's where California, that's the problem that they're running into, is they're pumping out so much, they're piping out and shipping out so much of their water in cattle and in fruits and vegetables. It's not being recharged. I can't see how they could even, and I know they don't have a DNR in North Dakota, but they have their Department of something or another. I can't believe that they would even think that this would be sustainable.
Well, and further south, again, we get into wetlands and the issues around the levels of water for wetlands. We get into navigation issues if the water levels are, again, taken down too low. And, that's Mother Nature as well as then what it is that we're causing, with our uses for water up here. So, it seems that we have a $22 million answer that's about 20 miles away if we do the expansion, as opposed to waiting for all of these various little political elements to somehow align and correct themselves.
There's an awful lot of uncertainties and unknowns to bank on when you have the aquifer right, like you said, 20 miles.
But then we also, if we go that route, we need to make sure that we protect that aquifer, right? We're doing a great job already, but it needs to be, that's the water. That is where we will rely on if the river runs dry.
And are there plans, I mean, to add another wellhead to the Buffalo plan? Are there other things in place, or can we incorporate other things so that you can make the amount that we pull minimal during those drought years, and instead, you know, what like you said, Dave, what can we do here to limit our water consumption that, you know, might make, you know, might help to an extent? Because I think that would have to be part of that preservation, part of that protection would come in other ways as well.
And we did a great, or not we, people before us did a great job 20 years ago when they built the water plant, when we decided to go and recharge the aquifer, which is now full, you know, can draw at the river. So it's things like this, or like that we need to really focus on and make sure that we have a plan in place. What happens if the water goes low? And I know there is some stuff from the state as well. But also in general, we need to protect that resource. Right? There will be no oil refineries sitting on top of it, kind of stuff. You know, so we all understand that this is where that's the future right there.
Yeah.
John, you had a question or a comment?
Well, has anybody heard of any issues that the state of North Dakota is going to have with conflicting projects for Fargo? The $1.5 billion diversion versus the billion whatever for the pipeline? As far as those, has any of that come up in discussion? Is there a priority been placed on any of those projects?
You probably heard recently the options now are even going toward kind of a private-public partnership where private financing is being considered as opposed to depending on the state or the feds for you know, those various shares of money. The legislature this year was firm in its support of the interior improvements that the city of Fargo is doing to complete the levee systems and such. But there again, you know, to go toward the funding for the diversion itself, you know, there's the special assessments vote that has recently, you know, been taken. There's also the conversation that continues with the legislature for what the state's share of diversion costs would be. There's just widespread belief that the federal government just won't be participating. So it's either going to be bonded or it's going to be contracted out, you know, privately in this scenario that was recently revealed. A lot of conversation there yet.
Chris?
Just to briefly address the questions regarding the feasibility of taking the Missouri, there really hasn't been a significant study done on the capacity, the long-term capacity of Missouri to supply Fargo and all the downstream partners with their adequate supply that they would need. You know, in terms of just the overall quantity, it's a small quantity of water compared to the whole flow of the river. It's a very small amount. But for similar projects, you get 50 to 100-page reports detailing that very subject alone. So there would need to be more extensive study that has not yet been completed for that particular project.
Do we have general consensus of the commission? It seems that way to me. Bill, Chris, is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah, and you'll have another shot at this when we we will get a request for a future assessment. We'll be writing this up, summarizing it, and asking you to basically decline that assessment request, and Ralph will have to go back and...
If it does appear.
If it does appear, and then, you know, so that's part of the issue, but I do believe we are hearing that consensus. The second part of what Chris talked about earlier was the timeline. Are you comfortable with the timeline? Because we're looking at 2020, really, or 19 and 20 to be starting on that. And that really is because of rate increases for our water main replacements.
In fact, if we might ask Nancy to just talk about what our financial planning kind of outlook and timeline would be toward that bigger project and adding that.
If she's prepared to do that tonight.
Maybe just a broad scenario. I'm not sure she's prepared to give us any details, but to at least discuss what it is we're going to need to do over the next few years.
Chris and I have put some numbers together, or he's put numbers together, and I've taken a look at them too. And so right now, Out in that 2020 or 2021 area, we have put some budget numbers in, and the funding mechanism that we think would be available would be, again, the funding through the public facilities, or our dwarf funding. So we would be trying to secure that funding again, and I think Chris has some pretty good ideas on how to make that project qualify for that type. So again, trying to stage it out where that will have its least, financial impact on our ratepayers. That's a big piece of it, and looking at the funding mechanism will be a big piece too. We don't have that option for funding if we go with another project source, so we've started to look at those numbers.
I think during the budgeting process this year, we'd want to start allocating resources to this project. It's easier from a planning engineering standpoint if we kind of build up to it, especially when we're using that drinking water revolving fund as a funding source. We have to develop an application. It's a several-year process, so the longer time period we have, the easier it will be. So I think, you'll get to certainly revisit that decision during the budgeting for the 2016 year, this fall, I would say.
A comment of former vice president that I reported to comes to mind. The time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. The time to get our water supply is when we have enough.
A question maybe for Chris and Ralph. What is our responsibility to our current colleagues with the other water groups that we're considering an exit, or that we're making an exit? What's our process? What's our step?
And how do we communicate that? That was my third point.
I think based on the meeting we had last week, I think, as mentioned, I think the September meeting will be a little bit more discussion at that point. And I think at that point we could bring up maybe, hey, we'd like to sit on the board, but we believe we're going to go, if that's a decision here, we're going to go our different route, and then maybe give up, at some point, give up our share in the project, if you will. With regard to the assessments, I mean, one of the things that we noticed in the meeting last week, and I'm going to get the numbers right, but I think there were about $750,000 assessed among the members, and about $200,000 have not been paid, which I think peeved off the 5 or 6 cities that had paid. So I think that's going to be a discussion to be had as well. And frankly, the discussion we will have to have in September, and I hope to be active in that, is to really ask the question, what is the role of this specific group in this process, right? And I think that's part of the discussion that has to be had, because there's the state involved now, 2 pipelines, and we have a group of cities.
We aren't the only players.
No. And that's why, Heidi, I mean, you and the council definitely should be involved in this. And not only from that political decision, but also from a decision, if we go with the aquifer, that is a fundamental decision that I think we all have to make and say, yep, this is why we believe this is the right thing. We have done our studies. We think there's enough water in there. We believe there's a way for us to tap into more water. We believe there's a way for us to protect the water supply. Because again, 20, 30, 40 years from now, people say, what the heck? Or say, wonderful, this is the right thing to do. With regard to how we're going to do it, I think we should maybe, even as early as the next meeting in September, bring up the question and say, hey, we are thinking about going a different route. Again, but that's a decision I think that should be based on the commission. It should be involving the council as well, because it is a big ticket decision.
We have communicated with city staff, just so you know. So Mike Redlinger is aware of our discussion tonight, of our recommendation, what's happened in North Dakota. But like you say, that conversation should probably happen so everybody has their opportunity to ask questions and do all that.
I'll plan to bring this up at the next council meeting. Our next council meeting is a committee of the whole, but we still have an opportunity to bring up,
items.
And if they need
updates and whatnot.
If they need updates from our staff, make sure to let Bill know. And
yep.
Well, and I'll be sure to just to note the importance and the enormity of the issue to make sure they're all well aware that this is going to be something that they will see.
And we can abbreviate a presentation at a committee of the whole meeting. I mean, you probably won't discuss it at length at that point. You'll just be giving them a heads up.
Well, I'll ask for an hour or so.
But put us on the schedule at some point. You know, I mean, you may want to.
If there's a reason to have a joint conversation, this is it.
Yeah.
You know, this is pretty far-reaching.
And the other thing is too, I mean, you know, I don't think this is, well, I believe we should make sure that this is not something that comes across as something negative. This is not because we don't believe in the project. It's not because it's you know, we luckily have two options. And from a pure financial standpoint, right, it makes sense for us to look at, it may make sense if the group decides to go with the option we have at hand here. And speed may be an issue as well. I mean, you know, if we have enough water in the aquifer right now with the two pumping fields for, 7 years, right? So we have some time. We're not going to, even if the drought started today, we have plenty of time to deal with that, but we need to get moving on that. So from a political perspective, just to make sure it's not a negative, it's just. Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we're not so sure about the pipeline because of sustainability issues, because of environmental issues. And if people want to construe that as negative, that's fine. But there have been no studies done, like Chris said. So if an entity or an individual wanted to construe it as, well, it's Moorhead being negative, or, well, I'm sorry, but I don't think it's bad that we want to look out for, the environment and water resources and do the right thing by.
And I also believe that
out.
if we exited the group, it would not be the end of the project.
No.
We are a small player, an important player. I think there would be other people who would be, or other entities who would step up to the plate at that point. So it would not end, it would jeopardize the project for the others. But I think we need to look at it from a purely, what makes sense for us perspective.
Any last comments?
Couple.
John?
Just, Rob, you're the sole representation for the city or for the commission. And I don't know if, at this point, with this getting further along, if there's any reason to have an additional person to join you if you can't make it or something like that as far as a consideration.
I think Chris is our alternate member.
All right, good, thank you. And the other thing here, as far as, I'm thinking we should probably do some projecting of what our capital expenditures are going to be, not only on the water side, but the electrical side, to see what we're looking at, because that would probably help us in making some of the decisions here and prioritizing what they would be. Because if we are looking at some of the projections of the rate increases that we are looking at, of hopefully dropping off some, and these would, we're going to have some other expenditures, and if they're going to be significant, we're still going to be looking at potentially significant rate increases for our city, and then that just brings a whole different discussion of funding and sources and request here for it. So I think that's something we need to start just brainstorming on and putting a list together of what we think might be coming up and down the
That probably should be ready for the first meeting of our budget committee, which is normally August.
Right, Budget Committee, we normally wait until we have a pretty good idea on where our purchased power costs are, but staff starts that budget process a little earlier, and we do take the 10-year approach to the planning, so we're looking at all the CapEx, the operations and everything, and especially on this water one, we are going to be watching the timing on it because we do have some significant increases coming in the next couple of years, so it would make sense to try to stage that and consider all the other things and prioritize, because I don't think we know we don't have enough, or we don't want to raise the rates as much as we need to if we did absolutely everything we needed. So we are going to have to prioritize some of those projects.
But then to Chris's point, I think the idea of thinking about maybe 2020, 2021 for a full start makes sense. Maybe there's certain things we can do in the meantime, whether it's easements, whether it's where are we going to go with this, where's the well field going to be, and do a stage approach before we then go into a larger capital expense. And hopefully in 7 years, if we look at 2022 or whatever, in 7 years, we will have a lot of the other big project, the pipe replaced at that point, that we can actually start moving cost over. And again, the good news is we have the resource, we have enough water for it, but we need to, work on planning.
I'm going to have to leave here, so are there any, I'm going to ask again if there are any final comments that anyone would like to make. If
Good discussion.
not, the meeting is adjourned.